All right, so every week I've been summarizing a couple different articles for just web standards and general engineering guidelines that we use. And I just like to summarize them so they're shorter or whatever. During these weekly video logs, I think I'm only going to do one article. Maybe we'll expand it later on, but who knows. All right, so this week I'm going to be talking about writing user interface instructions. And the article that I'm talking about comes from understandinggraphics.com. They wrote this great article that kind of summarizes different user interface ideas that are good to note when you're doing IA. All right, so just to summarize it, generally they say that user interface, specifically dealing with web applications, tend to be a lot like muscle memory. When you have a website, people expect certain things to react the way they think they are. So, for example, it's good to have rollovers. People expect that when you roll over a button, that it changes color. When you click it, it changes another color, et cetera, et cetera. All right. Think about it this way. If you have a box, sometimes it's good to stay within that box. All right. And it's not always good to say, oh, well, let's think outside the box, because if it violates muscle memory, you might want to avoid doing it. Some of the other things that they talk about with some of these mental models that's muscle memory with websites is that they prevent user frustration, because what you want to do is make a good impression on your users so they don't leave your site right away. Okay, so muscle memory, don't violate it. Your users will like you for it. Okay, so here's another thing. So when you're coming up with your information architecture, you have to be precise and concise without losing anything that's really important. So when you're summarizing your user flows in your information architecture, try to keep it as specific as possible while not forgetting anything crazy, all right? Okay, so here's another thing, and this always comes up. When you're choosing your fonts, specifically with information architecture and size and placement, it's really important to stick with your guns. If you come up with baseline rhythm for your fonts and a style guide, you have to make sure that your engineers absolutely stick to that, because all of that is well thought through, and you don't want the implementation phase to be changing your visual design, because at the end of the day, the information architecture is supposed to guide the engineering process and the visual design process for that matter. Okay, so another thing, when you have a user interaction on your site, generally you want some type of explanation about what needs to happen. For people who are less experienced with the web, it's good to have your instructions fully accessible to anyone who needs them. And although it's just a loose guideline, there's something called 508 compliancy, which is a good thing to implement on your site, just so anybody who's using your site with a reader or whatever has the ability to actually go through it. So in your information architecture, it's always good to explain not only in terms of your wireframe documents, but actually where the instructions sit in your user interface elements. So another thing, kind of attached to that last thing, is whenever you have instructions that you place on your site, you already understand how your application works. Get a second opinion for someone who has no idea what your product does or how to interact with it, because at the end of the day, that's generally going to be the type of person that you're targeting. So always use the lowest common denominator. I get tons of web help from my mom clicking through a website. She holds her mouse upside down, but that's neither here nor there. Anyway, so that's the weekly web Redux. Again, that was understandinggraphics.com, their article, Writing User Interface Instructions. Definitely check it out, and I'll see you next week.